Hey there, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jess with So Many Creations. In this video, we're going to do something a little bit different, or at least I'm going to do something different. This has been a very highly requested video. A lot of you are familiar with my Charlotte pattern. This came out at the end of 2022. Several of you have made them, or should I say, several of you have made several of them. It's a very popular pattern. And one of the things that I have been asked over and over again, can we make the entire outside out of cork? I guess I've kind of gotten you guys addicted to cork, and I might have thrown you a curveball by just doing fabric on the outside. But the reason, well, I have my reasons. When you look underneath the flap here, you'll see your credit card pockets, and those are all folded. That is not something that we really want to tackle with cork. Is there a way around it? Absolutely. But for today, I'm going to try something a little bit different. We're going to work together and see what works, what doesn't work, because I have two big questions about this. If I do it all out of cork, what changes will I have to make? That's my first question. My second question is, can my domestic handle it? I just got done making an all cork project with 5 layers of cork, and my domestic handled it like a champ. But we're gonna see if there's anything with this particular project that I have to change. I do have a heavy duty machine, but for the most part, I like to sew on my domestic because I know that a lot of you have domestics. So this particular sample, I did all out of canvas. I did do the cork front on the flap, and I did the cork handle and the cork tab. But today I'm going to make the entire outside out of cork, or at least as much cork as I possibly can. When I look at this bag, all I want to see is cork. So I have some ideas. We're going to kind of work through it together. I've never done anything like this, kind of combining a tutorial and a live video all in one. So we'll see how it goes. If you're interested, you can find the pattern on my website. We do also have kits. Of course, those kits would include canvas, but if you are here for the all cork and you want to see how it goes, grab a drink, grab a seat, hang in there, and we're going to get into this. All right, let's go. So I went ahead and I grabbed my pattern, and I grabbed an 18 by 27 piece of cork, and I just started cutting. I just wanted to see exactly what would happen, and if I could get all the pieces that I think I want out of cork out of that piece, and I did. This is my leftover, just so you can see that is all that I have left over from that piece. So I went through the pattern. I did already cut and prep piece A, so I'm not going to be doing a normal tutorial where I'm going to walk through every single step. I'm just kind of playing around with some different things and just kind of, doing bits and pieces. So you're still going to want to refer to your pattern and also to the original tutorial if any of this is confusing for you. So I went ahead and I did piece A. I did cut that out of canvas. I am going to do my top stitching on here, and then I'm going to add a piece of cork to that. So piece A is, so if we look at this, piece A is this piece right here. It's the center part with the credit card pockets. And I knew that if I was following the pattern and doing these folds with cork, that it was going to be way too much, pretty much for any machine that I have. Like even my heavy duty machine, I think could struggle through this. Plus, cork doesn't fold the same way that fabric does. I can iron my cork, I have ironed the cork, but it's not going to give me these nice creases. So I just felt like that would be one of the spots that was not really worth it to try and cork. I could make some changes. I could use a similar technique to what I did in Daybreak or in the Sydney wallet or in any of the other wallets where I've done credit card pockets. But instead of changing and rewriting the entire pattern, I wanted to follow it as much as I could and just kind of swap out cork. So I hope that makes sense. So what I did here is I cut and I pressed my A piece. I'm gonna go ahead and top stitch it. And before I add that onto the bag, as you can see here, the flap covers the majority of that piece. There's only a little bit down here. I want that to be cork. So I had a leftover piece. This is, I'm not even sure how big this piece is, but this was the leftover. I said hold for A, because what I'm going to do is figure out a measurement that works. I'm gonna chop off some of this canvas and I'm gonna add the cork so that it's down here. So when my flap is over this, which I do have my flap done, my flap will go right over the top of that, and then when I lift it up, I'll see my canvas. So that's really the only place on the front that you're going to see any of the canvas or fabric that you're using. So since we're here, let's look at the flap. Mine is already done. I was using it for another demo. Now on this one, I did do cork on the front and I did canvas on the back because that's what I had at home when I was working. I did go ahead and cut out my 2 pieces, which I guess I could get rid of now. Oh, I already did. Okay. So I did cut out the 2 pieces I need for my flap. I don't really need them, but I wanted to make sure and include that in the piece that I was cutting to make sure I didn't forget anything. So I cut my flap pieces. Flaps are, let me see here, G. I'm jumping around a little bit here just for a minute. I cut my G pieces the same exact size as the pattern. I used my template to do my curve. I put them wrong sides or right sides together, sewed around, turned it, top stitched it. I treated this exactly the way the pattern says for the fabric, except I skipped the interfacing. I'm not interfacing any of this cork. I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do for interfacing on A. We'll get there when we start playing around. So I did the same exact instructions for the flap. I didn't change anything. And I did start putting my hardware in as well. I told you this is going to be one of those all over the place kind of videos. So my flap is done. My A is partially done. Okay, so let's go back to the actual pieces here. B is the strip, the 2 strips that go on either side of the front here. So I've got my B out of cork, didn't change anything. I'm going to sew those right into the seam. Again, not interfaced. So that's kind of the front of my bag. Then I get into C. Where's my C piece? C. Oh, and I have an extra. Okay, so C, I always cut 2 for C by accident. I don't know why. C is going to be the back. So that is where my open pocket will go. So this is C right here. And then I had D, which is the pocket. I cut C out of cork. I don't know why I have that here. I'll move that. I guess I have a little extra, a little more than I thought. I cut the front of D out of cork and I cut the back of D out of fabric. D is 2 pieces where we're going to sew them right sides together, turn, press, and top stitch. I decided to do the back to cut down on some of the bulk that was going into those seams. And also just not to waste cork. I apparently had enough cork, but I just didn't realize that I did. So I'm going to just back that with fabric. I think that's going to work out a little bit nicer, keep a little bit of the bulk down. Now, since this is the back, just like the pattern says, this doesn't have interfacing, and I'm not going to change that either. So my D pocket will not have any interfacing at all. So that's the back. And then I also have my strips. These are E, so those are going to go on either side. So I've got my front, I've got my back. Now let's talk about the handle and the zipper tabs. So for the handle, I did not follow the instructions because, as I've told you guys for a while now, whenever you're doing cork handles, you don't have to fold them 4 times. With fabric handles, you fold them 4 times. So for a 1/2 inch finished handle, I would have cut it 2 inches with fabric and interfaced it. But with cork, you don't have to do that. So I could have cut these strips 1 inch, folded them in half, just like that, and had a 1/2 inch handle. But I have been cutting mine like a little bit bigger because I like to do a tri-fold. I've been doing that in a few, for a while now, and I've showed it in a few videos. That's what I'm gonna do with these pieces right here. So these are actually 1.5 inches. So I can do my tri-fold. I was cutting off of, I think this was the longer piece. This was like the 27-inch part of the cork. I did cut 3 of them. That way I can cut off a piece to make my F, which is my tab. So I'm going to prep this and then I'm just going to cut a piece off for the tab. I'm probably going to rivet that in place, even though I'm sure I could sew through it, and I understand kind of the point of this, but I just like how it looks. So I think I'm going to add some rivets. We'll get there and we'll kind of figure it out together. So I've got 3 strips just so I have enough for my adjustable handle. And now we're gonna get to the zipper tabs. And the zipper tabs I am undecided on. I have some scraps of fabric, so I can definitely use that. But I also have little pieces of cork. I'm not sure yet, because when you look here, there's your zipper and you have your tabs on either end. So when I put these on, this right here does not need to be folded under because this can be a raw edge, it's cork. So I cut these a little bit smaller. I think these are like 2-inch squares roughly. So I can cut this, I can, just put that on the zipper like that. Then I would have this layer over here plus the zipper to sew into my seam. I'm not sure, I know that I would probably be happier if it was cork because then the entire outside, everything I see would be cork. I'm just not sure right at this moment how I'm feeling. So I may switch that to fabric. And again, a lot of this is just gonna be kind of dependent on my machine, how it's feeling and what kind of thickness it wants to go through. My machine seems to be fine sewing through 5 or 6 layers of cork, but adding in zippers and hardware and all that kind of stuff, I'm just not sure if it's going to be pushing its limits. So we're going to work on that and see how it goes. So we're going to go into step 1. And step 1 is cutting and fusing, which we're all done with that. There is no fusing. I did not cut anything for the lining. I wasn't concerned about the lining today because I'm not changing anything with the lining. I will get to that at some point. So I'm skipping the lining. So all of my pieces are cut. Now it's time for handle prep. So I'm gonna just slide this out of the way. And just in case you were not around and you haven't seen how I like to fold my handles, these are gonna be a little bit thick. I like how sturdy they are, but they are going to be a little heavy. You may not want to do these if you have a domestic because of the hardware that we're adding. You're going to have 3 layers right here that you're going to top stitch through, but then you're gonna have 6 layers when you fold it over onto a piece of hardware. Not sure how your machine's gonna feel about that. Mine will probably do okay, but again, I think I'm just gonna rivet it. So you could easily cut your handles 1 inch instead of 1.5. So I'm gonna grab a ruler and a marking tool. And so because I've cut this 3 times, I'm gonna do a tri-fold. I'm going to just mark, and I'm not gonna do the entire thing because I do have to sew these strips together. I'm just going to mark a third, which a third is the finish width of my handle, which is a 1/2 inch. I'm gonna mark that line all the way down the strip, all the way down those as well. They will all be sewn together. It will be one long strip. And then I'm going to use tape. I'm just gonna use some double stick tape, put a piece on here, fold this over to that line, fold this to that line, just like that, do my top stitching. I can also use clips if I want. I'll probably just use tape. So I'm gonna head to the machine, sew this together, make it into one long strip, and then I will be back and we'll talk about hardware. So I finished top stitching my handle. I am going to just kind of move on and not do the hardware on this because this handle is not attached to the finished bag. I don't really need to finish it right now. So I did trim off a piece for the tab for the back. I will set that aside with my D-rings. And now I'm going to move on and we're gonna figure out our A and the bottom of A. So let's work on the front of our bag. I have my A piece all folded and ready to go. This is the piece that it should measure as per the pattern. I still have to do my top stitching, but I am gonna be heading over to the machine shortly anyway. I have this leftover scrap of cork, which is gonna be plenty big enough. I will get a measurement together and I will leave that in the information or it will pop up right here on the screen. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm going to leave the top half of the pockets and I'm just gonna trim this 1/4 inch past the bottom of this pocket, trim this piece, include the seam allowance, and I'll sew those right sides together. Then I can press that and top stitch it. So I'm gonna play around with that and I'll come back. All right, so far so good. This looks really good. I'm happy with how it's coming out. So I did cut this piece of cork that's on the bottom of A. So here's my pocket. I did cut that about 1/4 inch longer than it needed to be. Everybody's quarter seam is different. Every machine is different. So I'd rather, since I had the extra cork, go a little longer and then trim it down. So I will have the information for you right here on the screen. So I did go ahead and just sew that 1/4 inch. I put them right sides together. I pressed it down because all of my pockets are kind of already going down. It just made the most sense. I trimmed this piece right here, the A piece, 1/4 inch past this last fold right here. So there's my last fold. I trimmed that 1/4 inch, put those together. I pressed it, top stitched it. I did all of the top stitching for my pockets. It feels good. I don't think that I'm going to add the interfacing back here. I was kind of debating that. So in the pattern, because all of this would actually be made out of fabric, I usually put a piece of interfacing after everything's done to kind of stabilize it, but this feels really good. I don't think that I need to. If you're using cotton and not like a cotton canvas like I have, kind of just play it by ear. See what you think. If this feels a little flimsy, throw some interfacing behind these pockets. For me, I'm gonna skip it. I don't think there's gonna be a piece of interfacing on the entire outside, which is fine with me. It's one less thing I have to do. So now that that's done, I'm gonna go ahead and sew my sides on. So I've got my A, This is my B, this is my A plus. This is my other piece that I'm adding on. So I'm gonna go ahead and sew that together, get that pressed, top stitched, ready to go. And then, since I already have my flap done, I'm gonna go ahead and add my twist lock. I'm not gonna show you how to do that in this step just because you've already done that. And again, that is included in the full Charlotte tutorial. So you can check that out. But I have my piece right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this front finished up and then we will work on the back. All right, I stitched my B pieces using my 1/4 of an inch seam, just like the pattern says. I pressed outward, it made the most sense, and I believe that's what's in the pattern. I'm not following along very closely, but that is what made the most sense. Once I pressed that out, I did my 1/8 inch top stitching, which held it really nice and flat. When I took this to the iron to press it, the only part that I really had an issue with was right through here because it's so thick. So again, I use my pressing clapper. If you're not using a pressing clapper by now, I don't know what else I have to say to convince you to get one. Really, they make a world of difference because this was so flat even before I top stitched. So I have that done. I added my other half of my twist lock. So now when my bag is done, that's how it's gonna look. The only time I will see the fabric is when I lift up my flap. So I am super happy with that. I would say the front, not too many changes, just that little bit of fabric here, add your cork on the bottom, and otherwise skip your interfacing and just go as the pattern says. So now let's grab the pieces for the back and start working on that. All right, so these are all the pieces for the back. I have my C, which is going to be kind of the base part where my pocket sits. For D, I have one piece of cork for the front, piece of fabric for the back. Those are gonna get sewn right sides together, pressed and top stitched. That's gonna go on top of here, and then I'm gonna add these pieces. I will be back and we'll see how this looks. All right, so the back of my bag is all done. No problems with that. I'm a little off. I've been sewing really poorly lately. I'm not really sure what's going on. Maybe it's just me always trying to do too many things. Who knows? So I finished up my pocket. I sewed the fabric right sides together with the cork, 1/4 of an inch, pressed it, top stitched it just like the pattern says. So in the pattern, this would be my interface piece of fabric. Instead, I substituted it with cork. There's no interfacing. I basted it onto my C, and then I also put my E strips here. That's all done. So the next step is going to be adding the F tab. So in the pattern, it's going to show you how you're going to sew around this. And I know that even in Canvas, sometimes that can be a little bit challenging. The reason that I'm not going to sew around this, I'm just gonna rivet this on. A couple things, I think it'll look really cool with some rainbow rivets, that's number one. But also I did the tri-fold handle, which means this is 3 layers. When I fold it in half on the end for my D-ring, that's 6, and then I'm sewing it onto this. That for this machine, for my domestic, I know is pushing it. Plus I also know that trying to sew that, like trying to sew over that, my foot, my top thread and my bobbin thread are not gonna connect. My foot's not gonna have an easy time doing that. If you make yours a double fold, you should be okay because that would be 2 layers, 4 layers, and that would be your 5th. So you should be fine with that. But any excuse to use my rivet setter. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna trim this down, get my measurements all set, and I'm just gonna rivet this in place. So I have my rivet setter, I have my cutting and my rivet setting die. I trimmed my little F piece down. It was a little bit longer than it needed to be. I grabbed some tape. I'm actually going to use my tape to hold this in place. That way when I put it under the rivet setter, it's not sliding around on me. And I did use my friction pen to draw the placement line. I've been using my friction pen a lot lately, which is kind of funny because I hated these things for the longest time. I was like, absolutely not. I am not using that on anything of mine. It's gonna leave permanent marks. I don't believe that it erases. It does, and I really like it. So I've been using them all the time just because I know that I can get rid of this. So when I did the twist lock, I did the same thing. I had all of my marks all over and I can just get rid of them. So I don't know. Do you like friction pens? Are you against them? I don't know. A few years ago, that version of me was not enjoying them at all. So, all right, first things first, I've been using this die a lot and it is full of confetti. So we'll get that out of the way. Okay. So I'm gonna do my hole punch first. I don't know where my ProMaster is. I think it's at home somewhere, but I really like the Cam Snap 2.5 millimeter punch. It's a really good size for the rivets, pretty much for anything. I use it for the snaps too, but it is so much better than the Gold Star one. It really cuts through a bunch of layers really easily. So, okay, so let's see. First thing we're gonna do here, got all my junk in the way. I'm gonna add my D-rings, grab some clips. So I'm just going to add a D-ring on to each end, give myself enough room so that I can put a rivet through it. And I'm gonna clip it over here. No, I'm not. I'm gonna clip it here. I don't know what I'm doing. All right, put my other D-ring here, like so. All right, that looks good. I'm gonna throw a little piece of tape on here. I think that's going to help me. This is the 1/4 inch Bowen tape. I've been playing around with some other tapes to see which one I like, and I do like this one. It is on the heavy side, so it does gum up your needle a little bit. So I would say if you're using it, try not to sew through it if you can help it, or keep some alcohol wipes around to wipe off your needle. Okay, let's see. Get this where I want it, and then check it. Looks pretty good. All right, I am going to make some marks so I know where I want to put my holes. So put that in the center, and I'll put one maybe 3/4 of an inch. That should be good. 3/4, that seems good. It's definitely going through all of my layers. It's catching on the back side. Okay, that looks good. So I'm gonna keep my clips in place. I've got this kind of stuck down. It's just a lot easier to bring it over to the press. And do my center one first. Alrighty. Perfect, goes through all those layers, no problem. Let's make sure it wants to go through all these layers. This one I might have to do twice because that is a lot. So, oh yeah, get a nice workout on that one. Okay, it almost went all the way through. That's a lot of cork. All right, I'm gonna do it one more time. Really pushing the limits of my cam snap. So let's see. Oh, it's so close. But if I open this up, there. Okay. Done, easy. Okay. And I'll put my clip back in. Let's do this one. We already know what's gonna happen, so let me do this. Let me do the best that I can. My goodness. All right, I think that shifted. Oh my God. Okay, this actually hurts a little bit. So I find my hole with my scissors and I'll just finish punching. There we go. Okay, so that is done. So now we'll get our rivets ready. So I'm just gonna put these through, snap that on. There we go. That is a lot of layers, and I am kind of pushing the limits of my rivet, but it's working. These are the 8mm. These are the 8mm by 8mm that I sell on the website. So that means the width is 8mm and the height, the post, is 8mm. And that is 7 layers of cork, and it's going through. So put our die on, switch this. Alrighty. remember when you're buying a die set, you need a different one for each thing that you're doing. And when it comes to rivets, you want to make sure that you get the correct one. So these are double cap rivets because there is a cap on both sides. So make sure that you get a double cap. That way you don't smush one of them. In this case, it wouldn't really matter because the backside's not going to show. But if I was doing this on the handle, which I will do later, I definitely want both sides to look good. All right. All right, that's good. We're all set. So I'm gonna erase this line right here, and then we're gonna start playing around with our zipper. See what decision I make on that. All right, folks, decisions have been made. Are they bad decisions? I don't know yet, but here's where I'm at. I decided to use the cork tabs. I'm gonna see how that goes. I'm feeling like it's gonna be okay. That's how I'm feeling right now. And I wanna see the cork on the complete outside. I don't really think I would like this if it was fabric, so we're gonna see what happens. There might be an edit in this video where I tell you don't do that. So we'll see what happens. For the lining, I decided out of sheer laziness to skip the zippered pocket and to use waterproof canvas because I don't have to interface it. This might be a bad decision. I don't know. I'm gonna let you know, but I feel like if I'm gonna push the limits of my machine, I might as well just go all out. So this is where I'm at. I've got my front, my flap, my back. I did the zipper. I got that prepped just like the pattern says. So all I did was just fold these in half. This is a raw edge because again, it's cork. And there's my raw edges, which that would be in the pattern as well. That would be raw edge if it was fabric. Sorry, I'm not with the words today. So I'm going to assemble this exactly the way that the pattern says, of course, minus the zippered pocket. Will I regret that decision later? More than likely, but that's okay. It's gonna be cute anyway. It's gonna be adorable. So I'm gonna go to my machine, wish me luck. I'm sure that there are some people watching this video that are very stressed by it right now. I am one of them. So we're gonna see what happens, but I'm feeling good. I'm feeling like this is gonna be okay. This is not that heavy, and I'm only sewing through one layer of cork, one layer of waterproof canvas, and my zipper. I think it's gonna be fine. So stay tuned. I will let you know if it all works out. I just wanted to let you know. So far it's okay. I definitely really wish that I had a different foot. My 1/4" foot was giving me some grief, so I switched to my blind hem foot, which is working really well. What I did not like was not the front half, but the back half, because this seam, you see this seam right here? It was getting really close to my foot. That is like the worst stitching I've ever done. I'm probably gonna put my zipper foot on and go back in and just straighten that out a little bit because it's not great. But other than that, it was more where I was sewing next to, not what I was sewing through. So far it's all right. I'm gonna go give this a press, try to straighten out that seam, top stitch it, and then see how the final bit of stitching goes. In number 2, the zipper foot helped tremendously. So my seams are a lot straighter now, looks a lot better. I straightened everything out, so time to press, top stitch, and finish it up. I made it. I didn't cry. I didn't break any needles. I think the hardest part about this entire mission was again sewing next to thick stuff, not through thick stuff. I know what my machine is capable of. I know that it can get through some thicker layers. It's done that in the past. It's had no problems. But a lot of times it's not just what you're sewing through, it's what you're sewing next to. So if you're not flexible and you don't want to change out your foot and try different things, projects like this are going to be a challenge for you. You have to kind of be a detective in a way, kind of, try to put all the pieces together and figure out what's going to work and what's not going to work. For me, I tried 3 different feet before I was happy. I ended up doing my final 1/4" stitching with my zipper foot. It worked, except in one spot, it was kind of struggling. I did hand crank. I did, just turn the needle. I didn't want to break a needle. It's not that I mind breaking a needle. It's not like, it's expensive or anything like that. I don't want to break a needle because I don't want to hurt my machine. I'm afraid that if I break a needle, I can get a little piece of shrapnel stuck in the machine and do some damage to it. That's more what I'm afraid of. So again, I think the hardest part was near the seam on the back because it is close to the edge. The reason that this is so narrow is because of the cell phone pocket, because I made sure to accommodate as many cell phones as I could. If you're making this for yourself and you have a smaller cell phone, or you're not gonna use that pocket, if you wanna skip it or make it smaller so that your side pieces can be wider like this, it'll keep that seam, this seam right here, in a little bit further so it won't be so challenging to sew next to. Also, the zippered tabs. I like how they look. I think they look really, really cool in the cork, and they were not hard to sew through as far as the assembly step was concerned. Like putting the zipper into the bag was not the hard part, but because they are kind of stiff, when you're folding that and trying to sew again next to it, they were really, really hard to sew next to. So I just took my time. Would I do this again? Absolutely. As well, once I turn it all the way right side out and I see how it looks, I'll let you know. I will close that up afterwards. I'm just gonna tuck that in so I can just kind of see how this looks. But yeah, it needs a good press. I think my flap's a little cockeyed, but that's okay. I mean, honestly, I think it looks really cute. It wasn't the easiest thing I've ever sewn. No. Did my domestic handle it? Absolutely. So I say, yes, do it. I say you can do this. All right, I'm gonna finish fussing here, get my corners poked out while my lining is still open. Poke those out really well. I'm gonna finish up my handle. I'm gonna do that with some rivets. Give this a really good press, sew that lining closed, and I'll be just about done. Actually, I will be done. It's done, it's cute, I'm very happy. Everything looks really good. There's my fabric, the only bit of fabric. Got my lining in there, and there we go. Got a little thread I need to trim. All right, well, it worked. So I hope this helps if you are working on your next Charlotte and you want to do it all in cork. I hope this video gives you everything that you need, including the encouragement to go and try it. Again, the machine that I used was my Janome Skyline S9. It worked for everything. I did choose to rivet the back piece because I made it thicker, and I just wanted to make sure that I was not going to have any problems. You could, in hindsight, let me just go back for a minute. If you don't want to wrap this around your D-ring, because we'll just pretend that this is a handle. If you wanted to just put this instead of wrapping it around like this, if you just wanted to sew here, have your D-ring here, and then sew here, kind of locking it in, you could leave that totally flat and not fold those ends under. I'm just kind of thinking right now that that would actually probably work. I don't see why it wouldn't. Let me see here. So just so you can visualize what I'm saying, I have my handle. It's all top stitched and ready to go. This is a D-ring, we'll just say. If I stitch here and I stitch here, my D-ring can't go anywhere, and I could leave those ends totally open, so I wouldn't have to fold that over. So again, that's a total afterthought, but we are kind of working through this together. So there's definitely a way to sew the entire thing with cork on the outside. Be prepared with some different feet. It's a great way to really get to know your machine. Don't be afraid to try different feet. My needle, as always, was a 9014 Microtex. If you feel like you need to use a larger needle, you can do that as well. If you feel like 116 is gonna work for you, I don't typically go up that large. I do have some just in case, but you could absolutely do that. My thread was Aurifil 40 weight. Everything was the same. No interfacing. There's no interfacing in this entire bag because I use waterproof canvas. If you were doing this and you know that your machine can be a little finicky, you might want to make this part out of regular quilter's cotton and do your lining out of quilter's cotton, something a little bit more lightweight, and just kind of play around. But yeah, I'm super happy with how this came out. I hope this helped. If you like videos like this, don't forget to click subscribe, hit the little notification bell, and give it a thumbs up. All right, thank you.